She's.
I really don't.
It's what you do.
Yeah, I don't know.
I sound so stupid. And what is?
Well, and again, I do my best, you know, and then.
Passport.
Yes. I
The
just,
maintenance of
we've been
that
doing
memorial.
some, you know, I haven't had time, but.
Could you pass me an agenda?
Because that's in the lease. That's what the lease.
Oh, there they are. Oh, I'll get it.
That's all right, I'm already here.
No, dude.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
But that we do with all you
Thank you.
guys, is the, you know, the likes, you know, we all think that way, I try to hit that.
Great.
I always try to take that stuff.
I noticed that.
And we repeat ourselves. I mean,
It's on Holy Lorraine. If I say anything fast.
not Disney.
How about,
No,
yeah, Brandon, could you pass me?
and it's funny, we all have to do that.
You're like mushroom basket.
You know, you all have your own.
This is our New Year's Eve, you know what I mean?
thing.
Right.
Kind of the last thing of the fiscal year.
Kinda cool,
Yeah.
in a way.
So, yeah.
Got to know who's who.
How's Lupin?
It's so funny, I read it.
She's
like,
good.
oh.
She's talking a bunch, not like actual words, but you know. Making a lot of noises that sound like talking and. Yeah, she's good.
She's
I
a
just
year
got-
now? Is she a year?
No, not till October. so,
October.
Yeah, almost 8 months. Maybe she is 8 months.
I have some
No.
friends on Dublin Road. They have new babies, but I right in South Thomas.
Oh, so neighbors.
Yeah, they probably might not be that far. They're 117.
Social Security
I don't know where
email
Dublin Road.
today.
They still
Somehow
find
I'm still waiting for the new life.
Okay.
Back way.
And then I
Yeah.
When you go past the gig, that's Dublin Road.
Right.
If you go straight.
Yeah.
So we
do know where it is.
Yeah,
I
so,
know that was.
and you go up, there's a real hair.
Then when I-
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, we'll put it like that.
Vulgar race.
Every flaw has been.
It does.
I guess
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, Bill and Patty, you know.
Bill or Patty.
Oh, whatever. They could be wrong.
Okay, because they said you just did that.
All right, it's 6 o'clock, so we'll start the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody, in person and on Zoom. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? I'm not aware of any. No. Conflicts of interest, anyone? No. Minutes of the last meeting. Did everybody have a chance to look through those?
Tammy sent a couple edits, which I will do.
Tammy has some good corrections, yeah.
Yes, you stood with that.
I sound so intelligent. Um,
I move we approve the minutes as corrected.
I'll second. All in favor? Everyone, thank you. Communications, I had an email from Lorraine Gill about her eagerness to communicate with our code enforcement officer, which I forwarded to Brandon, and she now has an appointment with him. That's good. Some questions about the community calendar. I had a request about whether we could put the community calendar on the homepage of the town website, since people, you know, now they have to go to Discover St. George to find it. And personally, I think that would be fine. I know some people think it's best for town government things to not include things that aren't town government on the homepage. Thoughts?
Well, if there was a caveat on it that says, you know, the town has no control over these schedules,
Right.
the events. So a lot of times people ask me and they think they're town events and they're just not.
Right.
We have nothing to do with that.
A little
So,
disclaimer.
yeah, there has to be something on there that sort of separates. I don't mind that it's on the physical space, but we need to be able to distance ourselves so that people don't think that we run certain activities.
Well, if we were to do that, would people be okay with being on homepage?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would make it
Yeah.
easier for residents, and we want to promote knowledge of what's going on.
Right.
So a little disclaimer somewhere on it would be good,
All right.
because it's,
You would,
You take no position on it, and these are
take care of that.
private events.
I think that would be good. Um. Those were my communications that I remember at the moment. You probably had some communications from the public.
Honestly, I'm still working on getting caught up from the weekend, so I may have some that I have not yet seen.
Okay,
I had some positive comments about the landing, that
Good.
people thought it was very nice.
good.
Great.
All right, the warrant. Irene sent out this morning. I did have a question for you, Irene, about the Fisherman Memorial $10,000.
It's a donation that came in. And, when we had to put it in the trust fund. But I was just making sure that everybody knew that the money did come in, and we do have to move the money from the general fund into the trust accounts.
And the trust, the purpose of the trust is,
To maintain the Fisherman's Memorial,
okay,
when people's names get added, or if it needs to be cleaned or whatever.
And doesn't the lease specify that? Doesn't the underlying
Yes.
lease with
the lease did
The-
specify that the town.
regarding
is,
the lighthouse?
Yeah, responsible.
It's a pretty solid donation.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, from someone's will.
Nice.
Linda Bean's will.
Uh-huh.
Where it came
Mm.
from.
Nice.
Yeah.
Was this 33,600 to Jim Leslie, was that the final payment on the lighthouse walkway?
I'm not sure if it was or not.
Yes. it was.
This is the last one, okay. Okay, but we have received essentially donations that have covered the whole thing. If we do get reimbursed for FEMA, they would like to
Get some money
get
back.
reimbursed for whatever the FEMA reimbursement is.
Right,
We received the donations from the Lighthouse Association.
Right.
So
Mhm.
just so folks are clear.
Right,
And
from
they're
their
now
fund.
raising some,
Yeah,
seeking donations to support their organization to help cover it. So.
got it.
The people seem pretty excited about that being open again.
I was there today, it looks good. It was nice too, because they had the lighthouse open, which I'd only been before on National.
Did you go all the
Light-
way up?
I didn't do it
That
today,
one
but
day that they're all the lighthouses.
usually it's in September, but my stepchildren and grandchildren went up inside today for the first time because it's usually not open in the summer, so that was nice. But yes, they were encouraging donations at that time. All right then, any other questions or issues with that?
Is,
Warrant?
the ridge forge for the new railing that we have out in the front, that
Yeah.
looks great.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that was
Yeah, well.
very much needed.
It was required actually by.
Was it?
Yeah, we had an inspection a little less than a year ago. And they said that we needed to add a railing there.
Uh-huh, yeah, yeah.
Noah does beautiful work.
Yeah,
He does.
yeah, he really does. And
Great.
try to prioritize, keeping
Mhm.
business local when we can, so.
It all started when he went to my mom's nursery school.
All right, do we have any comments from people on Zoom, members of the public, anything other than what's on our agenda for tonight? No, all right. Then we'll move on to our regular session, Brandon. The paving contractor issue.
So the main thing is we have to choose a contractor, just so everyone is aware, we. Had an error in the formula that we were using to calculate our budget for it. We were under the impression that we did 2 miles of paving. In this last year, and so we used, and that cost around $85,000. So that's what we used to calculate it. Afterwards, once it was too late, we realized we only did 1 mile. And so we well under budgeted the original plan, which was 4 miles to try to get us back onto the 10-year road plan. And so we put the bid out for 4 miles. The 2 bids came back at over $400,000. We have, 165,000 available for next year. And so,
For the year starting tomorrow.
yes, yes. And so now we can still choose a contractor. They, they provided their prices and their total quotes. And so that's enough information that it doesn't need to go back out for bid. And so we'll select one and then I will work with the contractor to amend the plan. My thought is to just do, what we can with, 165,000. It may
Yeah.
include a thinner overlay. Our roads are in pretty good shape. None are like really all that urgent, but that's because for so long we've stayed with the 10-year road plan. So
Maybe in the following year, we can sort of get back on doing more mileage
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
budget
it's
for it.
the price has gone up as well. And so it's over $100,000 per mile.
Wow.
And so to get caught back up, we would have to be budgeting. If we wanted to do 4 miles over the next, I think this will be the 4th year that we've fallen behind on. So, if we wanted to do 4 miles a year, that's a resurfacing budget of, $450,000 or so.
Well, maybe we want to do 2 or 3 miles per year.
3, yeah, 2 would mean we would fall further behind on
So
that.
3 might be a good compromise.
Mhm. 3 miles is what the plan includes, but we have, many roads that are behind that 10-year schedule now because we haven't hit that for the last 4 years.
Rick Erb had made a decision to not do as much paving when we were taking on the ambulance. So we had that overhead, so that was the reason.
And I think before that, there was uncertainty around, COVID and whatnot. And so
Mm.
I think between those two things, paving was where, he looked to keep taxes down and the budget
On
level.
the other side, if you don't keep up with maintenance.
Now,
Right.
end
now
up
we're
costing
looking at
more.
$450,000,
Yeah.
so it's not really, long term, it's not a good area to try to save money because it does just cost more. So anyway, the bids are a little odd because we got a bid from Hagar and a bid from Performance. We used Performance the last couple of years. Hagar's price per ton and price per ton handwork were lower, but Performance's overall bid was lower.
Huh.
And so I think Hagar's, estimating more tonnage of asphalt than Performance is. So it makes it a little difficult to choose the bid. I think I would opt for Performance. They were technically the low bidder. And we've had a good relationship with them over the last couple of years. So
Who's doing the school parking lot?
Performance.
Yeah.
So that part is pretty convenient that they're down here right now. They could start.
The library driveway got their votes too. But they pay.
They are more local than Hagar. Hagar's out of Damascata.
And you didn't get a bid from Jim Calic?
He doesn't do that.
Oh, he doesn't do.
He does like the prep work for the roads. So
Oh,
he'll
okay.
put in, he'll do the ditching, he'll put in culverts. So before the roads get paved, but he doesn't do any paving.
Do you need us to vote on this or just endorse your decision as road
I'm trying to remember, I think you all technically make the decision.
Because it's a contract.
Right, and then I can enter into the contract, but I believe that
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be initiated by a vote from you all.
I move we authorize our town manager to go with the bidder that he recommends.
Performance.
For performance paving.
Yeah, the low bidder.
I'll
second.
And you said you were gonna negotiate with them to try to do less miles? Where
We'll
it's so
definitely,
expensive?
we'll definitely do less miles. We would have to,
Yeah.
we'd have to go, if we wanted to do it, we'd have to, get another vote, I think, and I just,
Right.
I don't think it's a good idea. I think we should
Okay.
stick with what
Yeah.
was budgeted.
So you're gonna try and get like 2 miles for the money we have, maybe?
If we can, we may be able to get 2 miles if, if we do a 1-inch overlay as opposed to an 1.5 inches. And so, I'll work with Jake from Performance on figuring out how we could make the most out of 165,000.
Stretch it.
Yeah.
Okay, Brian seconded that. Is there any other discussion? All in favor? That's all 5 of us. Thank you. I'm gonna skip the select board priorities just for a minute because that's kind of the bulk of what we need to talk about. And see if we can get through the committee nominations of which we're aware at the moment. And we could do these in the order that they're on our committee list here. Do you have people for the planning board? Wendy, or
We've done that already.
We did those,
We did
okay.
those, yes.
And what about the Board of
The
Appeals?
Board of Appeals, there may be people, because I think there are people jumping off. But right now, the annual meeting is in August, and it's the one day that I will not be available. And I, put in my response that I wasn't available that day, and that's the one day chosen. So we're still trying to work out how
Well,
there
one
can
of
be
us can go.
coverage. Yeah.
What day is that?
It's the 28th.
Well, I can't go either. I'm going to a wedding.
Yeah, see, I'm going to an airport, so yeah, so I'm working with Megan and we'll try to work it out.
Okay, I
Yeah,
know that Sandra Roque has given me her
right,
resignation.
right, and right, yeah.
But I think there are probably enough people, if the current people are willing to continue,
Okay,
they'll still be all right. All right, the Harbor Committee guys have. We don't know yet who all wants to stay on.
Right. I haven't heard anything from Harvard, so.
Okay, there's a tentative meeting scheduled for July 15th.
Okay.
Dan Moore sent an email about that, but
I think that's when we'll find out who's staying on.
that's right.
They need to replace the whole committee.
No, I'm hoping for continuity, we need some of them to stay on, not all, but. All right, so for the budget committee, Scott Bytones resigned, as we all know, he moved away, so we've accepted his resignation, and I will move that Betty Oakes become a full member. She has been an alternate member.
Awesome.
All in favor? That's everybody. What about the cemetery committee? Do we know?
I looked at that on the list that you sent and everybody's current, whether it's all a new committee, so
Okay.
everybody's good.
All right, and for emergency services, Richard Bates has resigned. Dr. Lowy has agreed to serve as chair of the committee,
Good.
which is wonderful
He's a
news.
good guy.
That committee is a little complicated because there are a number of town employees on the committee, and I didn't think that the majority of voting full members should be employees. So it's helpful that somebody who's not paid by the town agreed to be the chair. And they too are in the middle of figuring out who else who needs to be, I mean, they all will need to be renewed because it's an ad hoc committee, but I can't do the nominations right now. The TIF committee, everybody wants to be renewed. So I will make a motion. Let's see if I can all remember all of them. I didn't bring that.
Carl Danielson,
Carl Danielson,
Jason Ludwig,
Jason Ludwig, Van Thompson,
Alexia.
Alexa Cunningham, and George Hobbs. I will nominate those 5 people to be the members of the TIF committee and Ryan Aponte to be the alternate.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, that's everybody. Comprehensive Plan Committee is kind of in a holding pattern, so we'll skip over them for tonight. Conservation Commission.
Conservation Commission. All right, we'll take it away. So I guess we need to renew the, renominate the regular members, Ken Olberger, the chair, and Ally Wood. And then there's 1 year those would be 3-year terms, right?
Correct.
And there's the associate and alternates, which are each 1-year terms, and that would include Ryan Lashane and Ingrid Mraz and Tom Gorel, who are all associates, and alternate members, Stu Rich and Dick Pelletier.
All right, I'll second those. Any discussion? All in favor? That's 5. Thank you, Steve. We don't need to do anything about the Shellfish Committee, do we? Okay. The Solid Waste Committee,
Now, my head sent the list, and I think some of the people came in to re-sign up, but I do have, Beverly gave me the list of people if I need to. Beverly Emerson is re-signed up, and she is also the chair. I have her email and phone number if you need it.
Okay.
Jane Bracy has re-signed up. Deborah Wheelock. Dorna Caskey has re-signed up, and she's also the secretary. Raymond Emerson is an alternate, and Jan Lehman is an alternate. And Anne Marie Merrill should have been removed.
right, we'll take her off since
Right.
she's deceased.
Right.
All right, maybe you can email me that, or,
If you want, do you want it?
yeah, that'd be
You
great.
can have it.
Then I can update it on that spreadsheet. Thank you.
Okay.
So you wanna move those people,
I make a motion that we.
do that
accept the
slate?
Nomination.
All right, I'll second that. All in favor? That's everybody. Parks and Rec, you said they'll decide in September?
Where they usually, well, usually we re-signed in June and had it all. We never do an August meeting, so July meeting is just short days, and then we never did an August meeting, but I think Ashley's planning on it, so we have a meeting tomorrow night. So I'll
Okay.
talk to her tomorrow night.
And she'll be the acting chair until, or she has been, since, yeah, okay. Resilience.
I'll have to check with Suzie. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, some people are coming back on for another year, but some may not.
Well, and I realized after I nominated Van, I was nominating him for the TIF committee because he went off the select board. And he had been on the resilience committee before he was on the select board, and then he was the liaison, that I just threw his name in there, which I think surprised him and surprised Susie. So he's on a cruise in Alaska, but I said to him, if you don't want to do that, because I know they're doing a lot of work right now, nobody says you have to do it. So that was my mistake. I think I just was thinking he was gonna go right back on. All right, well, we'll get the other committees, we'll identify people in the next 2 meetings, let's say. Let's get it all nailed down by the end of July. So thank you, everybody. So I know the select board priority list this is a big challenge, to figure out which things we'd like to focus on, and, one of the questions is, do we include things on the list that we know are already rolling along? But if they're included on our priorities, then it's kind of recognition that they're rolling along, like the climate action plan, for example, or developing a TIF program to bring to the voters. So I guess before we tackle the individual things, I'm curious what people think about how many priorities we have and how we should decide what they are.
Well, I think we should really limit just to a few, because we have emergency things happening all the time, and we just finished the Port Clyde Landing. We had a big property purchase. We've had all these major events, and I just feel like we should pull back a little bit and only pick a few, because we know there's gonna be other things happening. And I also think our budget is so lean that we can't really do that many of them. And you know, if we say these are our priorities, then I think we create expectations for the voters, and we don't have any money to do. I mean, that sounds overly dramatic, but we don't have a lot of extra money in our budget to take on major projects. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning, that, you know, so all these things are laudable things, but can we really make a difference with the amount of money we have set aside for some of these things?
Well, and most of the things that get done of the type that are on this list are done by volunteers. You know, like the comprehensive plan was 21 months of work by volunteers plus Erin. And we do have Erin for another 14 months, and she's kind of fully booked with these. Some of the things that are on here, she's supporting the TIF committee, she's supporting the
Right.
Resilience Committee and Climate Action
Right.
Plan.
Right.
And she's working on community education around the working waterfront, you know, the talks and stuff. So yes, that is part of our challenge, is that we are calling on volunteers to do things, and a lot of them are, I wouldn't say maxed out, but they're already doing a lot.
Right, right. I mean,
Um,
I think we need to think about immediacy in terms of what's coming up in the next couple of years. Like the TIF, I mean, that seems to be a priority to me. You know, the fundraising for the rec center, I think, is gonna happen. So, hopefully in the next year to 2 years. Some of the other stuff, to me, when we're supporting and collaborating, you can acknowledge that, but I don't think we should take that on as a select board priority. That's just my thinking. That
Doesn't mean we're opposed.
no, not at all. It's just that we are not telling our voters that we're taking responsibility for that. I think in many cases, we have nonprofits and individual volunteers doing things. So that's my 2 cents. I mean, people can disagree with my view of what we are doing in the next year. So anyway.
Anybody else? What are you thinking, Steve?
I'm thinking 20 priorities. is a lot.
This, I was never thinking we were,
You're doing all of them.
I put everything on here that, yeah, I suppose
This
I
could be
should.
like a 10-year plan.
Well, and partly this list emanated from things that are in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah,
And because the members of the comprehensive plan committee were so close to the surveys and the goals in there, I did ask them to each send me 5 priorities. And those are all reflected on here.
I'm reminded of that sort of silly saying, if at first you don't succeed, lower your expectations. It's kind of like. It's like, let's lower our expectations, maybe pick 5 or 6 like priorities that we think I might actually achieve.
Well,
And that would be enough. for
Yeah,
me.
I think 5 is.
So I'm
a good
sort of-
Well,
number.
I'm
Sure
gonna
about
do
that.
that exercise right now. Pick 5 that,
That aren't expensive. Mm.
I did have the one I suggested to you that I wanted to bring. up.
It's basically on
It is in
the
here?
bottom now, it's number 20.
Okay,
Although, I don't know if you guys, yeah, you have it 20.
yeah. I would like to keep the,
and that doesn't mean that we're not gonna work on some of these other ones. It's
Right.
just that making it a priority.
Well, and some things that are on here, like developing a capital investment plan, that's something that Brandon's been working on. And I think that would fall in category of, we would like to see that happen, but I don't know how much time it's gonna take from us.
Okay,
What are your,
I don't think it'll take any time besides reviewing.
Right,
the first
okay.
draft I put together.
It's more like your priority list.
right,
well, we all know it needs to be done.
okay.
And things like improving collaboration with the school board, that's gonna happen. We all know that needs to be done.
Okay, well, I picked 5. The fundraising effort for the rec center, the TIF program, the climate action plan. The improved collaboration and coordination with the school board, because that might involve, I mean, we've spent a lot of time on those issues this past year. And also acquiring land for public access. Yeah, that's what, those are mine, so. Somebody else has another version.
I'd like to see us do some, even if it's the first steps. On water quality issues, which would be primarily education on the website. You know, about, who. The state, like the DMR and DEP resources. And then, you know, we talked about this before, telling people if you have a well, you're responsible for monitoring your water quality and things like that. But then I think, given the prominence of this as an issue in the comprehensive plan, I thought if we at least took some steps to be talking to Herring Gut and David Taylor and different people and getting current information.
See, I always worry about that, because are they trained to take water quality samples? I mean, you never want to put water test results that have not gone through like quality control, like QA/QC process. And so, you know, I do think citizen scientists are helpful, because they may alert the state or the feds that certain tasks have to be done, but giving them credence, I worry about that. You know, if I go out and stick a bottle in the water at my house, am I doing it right? Am I creating the concave shape that the bottle has to have? I just worry about that are we going to give water quality results? I don't mind that somewhere on the website you have the information you mentioned, and here's who you can call at DEP, DMR. But going beyond that, then I think you create an expectation for citizens that we're gonna fix the problem, we're gonna do all the testing. Well, it's way, 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 way too expensive for us to get into that area.
I just sent my well sample off to, well, I didn't send it off. I just paid the money to have a complete water test on my well, but that's a private decision.
Right,
that
right.
Absolutely,
homeowners,
yeah.
Landowners
Yeah.
made. I mean,
Yeah, I
I wouldn't
mean,
mind
I-
sharing the results, but it's like,
Right.
yes, it's
And
an optional thing.
In general, what people get done for their private wells would not show like a gas spill or an oil spill. It shows like E. coli, it shows critters in your well. But yeah.
Critters.
But, well,
Some of us have had.
yeah, and so, you know, then you have to shock your well and stuff, but
Yeah.
I just think, I don't know, that's my view, that if you're gonna create an expectation for citizens that we're watching that area.
I'm not thinking that, we would be watching anything to do with people's private drinking water. But I was thinking, with respect to the ocean water, the river and the ocean, which affects fishing, clamming, that if we could work in collaboration with Herring Gut and or others.
But what do you mean about working in collaboration? What does that mean for the town and spending money and, you know, staff hours? What does that mean?
Well, I know Herring Gut does a certain amount of monitoring now, but
Hmm.
presumably they would need more money to do more monitoring. Like if we wanted to have some concept of the water quality all around the peninsula, we would have to be budgeting for that.
That's a lot of money.
And
It's a lot of
coming-
money. It's a lot of testing and a lot of money. And water quality can be many things to many people. Are you talking about how, from a waste side, like an E. coli waste side, or are you looking at what kind of chemicals are in? If you take a sample in Tennant's Harbor where people are scrubbing the bottom of their boats with bleach, you're gonna have a different snapshot than maybe, down by the lighthouse. So,
Well, maybe the first step in approaching a decision about this whole water quality issue would be to have in this calendar year, fiscal year, have some kind of panel discussion, with some experts, like there was a University of Maine biology professor that came to the select board in the months before I came on the board, and I heard her do a presentation. And David Taylor came with his information, and you could have Herring Gut, and we could get information from them about what they think the issues are, what they think would be useful, and if Jeff Schroeder wanted to talk about the impact on clamming, and somebody wanted to talk about the impact on fishing, then we could just think about, should we do anything about this? Should we build something into our budget for next year? Or do people feel like this isn't our role?
I still really think this is very, very expensive. The issues of clamming is acidification of the water, and acidification comes from a number of sources, from industrial pollution, from if people are, putting fertilizer on their grass. And so I just think it's really, really complicated. And, I know when I've paid expert witnesses hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. And so I just think you have to be careful with little pieces, because what do they really mean? I mean, if there was a problem, you'd have to get the state or the feds here to really do accurate
Right.
testing. So to me, it's only good as a bellwether if something showed up, and then it would have to be proved scientifically that it really exists. So I remain opposed to it, just because I think we don't have the money to take it on. Nor do we have the expertise. I mean, you really need
Right.
like a biologist to come in. So,
But you would be okay with the educational component.
I would, but I think better on the website than having community meetings or conversations.
I think
The people who come to those are the people that already are interested in that area and already do it. You want to reach out to people who have no idea what could be in their well.
Brian and Tammy, do you have any thoughts?
So were you talking about private wells, or are you talking about streams we have and the coastline around the peninsula?
Well, I think the education on the website would be dedicated to private wells.
Right.
If you have a well, it's your responsibility. Just know that, and you could call Haskell or whatever, or if you smell something at Ripley Creek, you can call, but DMR is gonna do the testing, or DEP in some cases, but I think it's mostly.
But so it would be a private issue. If.
Right.
Yeah.
But then the other question I was thinking about, given that you regularly hear at the Shellfish Committee, and David Taylor also goes to Conservation Commission
Mhm.
and talks about his concerns. And we do have people who are making a living from the water. Should we be doing anything about the river and ocean water? To even as a bellwether, have a sense of, should we be doing more about dog waste? Should we be doing some community education around, don't use Roundup, don't use certain other stuff on your grass if you're near the water.
I
that was-
think that it doesn't hurt at all to have an educational type meeting or whatever together with other groups like Aaron got and the people you were talking about. But I don't think it needs to be a select board priority at that stage. I mean, if it becomes a problem, yes.
Mhm.
But I mean, I think until it's a problem, I don't think it needs to be a priority for this group. And we should definitely keep an eye on it and be monitoring it, but as far as budgeting and all that, I don't see without some sort of hard reason.
Well, we're not doing any monitoring now. We could just gather together the people that are doing it or make
Yeah.
sure they let us know if they're
Okay.
aware of something.
Get Aaron Gut and whoever else
Right.
together and have a meeting, public meeting. I could see doing that.
I mean, they are a terrific resource to have in our community.
They are.
But there's also like the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, which, has experts that can inform you. And issues like ocean acidification are huge. I mean, that's the whole Gulf of Maine. Warming temperatures and how that affects
Jellyfish right now.
the fisheries. Not something we can really tackle as a select board.
No.
Well, and, we've talked about, housing and land use issues. One of the recommendations in the comprehensive plan is to take some next steps on land use issues. And I don't think that the volunteer groups we have now have the bandwidth in the coming year to tackle a whole discussion of should we have zoning and an open space plan and ordinance changes for housing. But I do think, Ken Olberger said to me that he thought the Conservation Commission could take on the open space plan piece of that in the coming year. And I do think this recent law, LD 1829, signed by the governor a couple of weeks ago, along with our proposed housing project, Route 73 by the CDC, we are going to have at least some look from the planning board or some smaller committee of people to look at possible ordinance changes.
I think the housing crisis is so real in this community and across the state that having affordable housing or whatever you want to call it, workforce housing could be a priority.
Well, and that's
At least supporting the CDC's plans.
Yes, that's what number 7 is.
Because the group is really doing something about it.
Right. Number 7 is on the list.
I'd like to see that stay on the list.
To work with them. And Rob, I see you're on Zoom. Do you want to address this?
Sure. Yeah, I think obviously, we rely on volunteer labor for a lot of this kind of work. And, we're committed to this, not just because it's our project, but because basically we think this is a community good. The changes for 1829, I think, well, we have to address them. I don't think they're going to be that burdensome in the sense that basically, at least in my reading of the new law, they're pretty directive. They kind of say what you need to do, and I think we'll be able to get model ordinances from other communities. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's other things. I'll preview it here. I've already spoken to Ann and Michael that we're going to propose to the planning board that we begin examining contract zoning. So that we can, in very specific instances that serve a public good, make, essentially individual project exceptions to zoning. That may or may not move forward. If it does, we're prepared to provide resources to support it, including providing the planning board and the select board with model legislation that has been used elsewhere in Maine. So I think where we can, we're trying to leverage existing work that we know has already been vetted by other municipalities. So I think that, you know, it's extra work that wasn't anticipated. Obviously, we're in favor of moving forward with it. And we have some bandwidth to support it from a volunteer perspective, including some actually paid expertise as well as part of our investment in the development of Route 73.
Well, in terms of sort of thinking about conflicts, we'd have to figure out, you know, what the ramifications would be of, it sounds wonderful for you, to offer, help you're paying for, but it may or may not be something we can accept. We'll just have to see how that works.
No, I understand your point exactly. It would more be that we'd have the research to say, you know, these 15 communities have adopted this, you know, this model ordinance. Then it goes through the you know, proper public
Right, the
process.
usual. Brandon, do you have thoughts you want to share with us?
I mean, I think I echo the desire for the list to be concise, right? I think in an ideal, you know, the way that I set goals and priorities with staff is that it's maybe less than 5 at times, or 3 even, so that if I ask somebody what their priorities are, like they can name them. They don't have to go find the document. They don't, you know, it stays front of mind, you know, and with the smaller list, we can build a more routine check-in into the agendas. That being said, you know, I present proposed tip program, like that's gonna happen, you know, like there's a committee working on it, you know, and if it doesn't get presented, it's because that committee deemed that there's no good path forward, right? And would likely present that to you all to decide. So I would remove the things that groups of people are already dedicated to and focus on the ones where it needs more attention, and it should be the attention of the select board and, you know, folks that are elected.
Well, I mean, if we take things off, like the climate action plan and the TIP plan, then which things do we feel like would? Well, I mean, obviously, the school board thing would remain.
I think we should look into the short-term rental registry and inspection. I think that would be a big one, but I mean, and a lot of towns are doing it, and there's a lot of leads to follow and research to do.
There is more of a pathway now than there likely was the last time this,
A year ago when we talked about
yeah,
this.
Yeah.
Well, I think, what we know from the comprehensive plan survey of the community for like regulating and limiting the number of short-term rentals, support for that was only 47%. But something like a registry and inspection program like Camden has, I mean, we didn't characterize it as that, but something that was monitoring and keeping track of who's renting places.
Yeah,
Support for that was 60
I
something,
think
you know.
that's all we need. We need registry and inspection. Make sure they're renting safe homes and
Who's gonna do,
we know who's doing what.
who's gonna do the inspection?
Brandon told me he was gonna do them.
Okay, to the next problem.
I can also say that our, you know, our code enforcement office does not have enough capacity
That's
to
right,
take it
that's
on.
right, yeah, that's right.
But it doesn't mean we couldn't look at this if people want this to be something we're gonna look at. Let me just tell you, Brian, last year I put this on our priority list. And the week I was on vacation, when they reviewed the priorities, they took it off. These other people.
Dead.
Erased from the priority list. So,
Maybe we don't do a full town inspection, but we just do like a fire marshal inspection, like daycares. A daycare has to have a fire marshal inspection every year.
Well, either we don't
Pay
need,
for it.
We don't need to have inspections started in the year, but it is an
No.
issue where there currently isn't a group dedicated to working on it. And so if you all took on some of that early legwork to figure out what it would look like, what would be required from a staffing perspective to do these inspections, because once we know how many we have, how many annually we need to do, like that type of legwork to put together, but that would take a full year anyway.
We could start off with registration.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of a registry, partly because I think it would be useful for us to actually know how many homes in St. George are not lived in year round, I mean, obviously we can't.
I mean, I think people aren't gonna register. I think there's gonna be a low rate at least. And Brandon would say, oh, starting out, there would be a low rate, but I think people are gonna lie by omission.
Oh, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, obviously, all those issues are part of the process if we decided we wanted to look at this and work on this. My bigger question is who would do this? Each of us already has 2, 3, in some cases 4 committees that we are serving on.
And also, what's the end goal about registration? I mean, we could probably just go one night in December and count. I'm serious. I mean, almost all of Main Street is dark in Tenants Harbor. Almost all of the village of Port Clyde is dark. But where's that gonna get us? What are we gonna do with that
It
information?
can be a pretty sizable income generator if you have an annual permit fee.
Like in Camden. I mean, although I don't know, Brandon,
I think
that
people are gonna-
generating revenue would be seen as a positive reason to do this by the community. We're looking to raise money off of that.
I think a lot of people would be in favor of lowering the tax rate by having a fee for houses that are not lived in year round. I actually think that would
Mm.
Yes.
garner more support
I
than
think
you.
it's those
I don't
local.
know, is that constitutional?
Well,
to
you
do
you
that?
couldn't,
I don't think
you
it
couldn't
is,
tax people
Yeah.
for seasonal
Yeah.
residents.
It's not a tax, it's
Yeah.
a.
but it amounts
It's a
to
permit fee.
Yeah, but
I don't
for
want to-
short-term rentals, yes, I think you can, if it works the way like Camden did it, where they have to register, they have to undergo an inspection, and if they pay, I think in Camden, it's $300 a year. That's partly how you pay your code enforcement person to go out and make sure that they're safe. You're generating money that helps you do that.
Hmm.
So to me, it would be good to know how many properties are being rented and that, that they're following particularly septic requirements and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, with septic requirements, when I rented my house, that I said only 6 people can be here, and then they were 13.
Right,
So, regardless of what the owner says,
right,
there can be issues.
right, but at
Party
least,
house.
Yeah.
Quick question, and citizen here. You had said earlier that 47% wanted this. I mean, that tells me
47%
wanted
right.
something.
supported,
Of people.
only 47% were in favor of, really regulating short-term rentals.
Okay, if
So
the
let's
round
say-
numbers, it's, 1 out of every 2 people kind of
Right.
wants that. So it sounds to me like and again, I don't know if that 47% was full-time residents or everybody that took the survey. I don't know who it was. But it sounds like there's enough, 47%, 50%, there's enough interest to at
To look
least
into this.
pursue something to do some initial investigation.
Well, and the interest in monitoring this was much higher, 65
Oh,
or
okay.
something percent. So I think that definitely does tell you people would like us to pay attention to this
Pretty clear.
and look into it.
But see, what I've heard people say is they want us to limit the number of short-term rentals. That can't be done.
Ever.
It's unconstitutional. You can't prevent people from making money that way. That if we say when Rockland tried it, they had 45
They have
spots, and then you had to be on a list
Waiting
to get.
list.
that's not gonna happen. We're gonna pay more in litigation than we get in permit fees, et cetera. So I just think, where is this going if we're gonna have, other than the inspections?
Well, I mean, if you're collecting permit fees, you don't want to limit it anyway.
Right.
You'd want more.
Wait.
I think the inspection
Right.
is limited.
Yeah, well, what is it? I believe in Florida, they charge non-residents who just go down there for a certain period of time to live, like just winter months and things like that. They charge, there's an out-of-state residential tax.
That maybe the state has something like that, but the town wouldn't have
Town
the
can't do
authority
that.
to, no. And I guess I would question, in so many ways, seasonal residents are floating our boat. They don't live here year round. Let's say they're here at maximum 10 weeks a year or something.
Right,
The rest of the year, they're not calling 911. They have no kids in the school, and yet they're paying as much or more in taxes than you and I are. So why should we penalize them in a lot of
This
ways?
is about short-term rentals though, not seasonal residents.
No, I know, that's the
Even
confusion.
seasonal rental, any house that isn't on the voter registration address, because we can go by that number.
Well,
You know,
regardless, the
right.
town doesn't have any authority to set laws or rules around taxation. So
Right.
that can't happen. You can have permits though, require
Or-
permits. Camden just did it for
A lot of
short-term
them
rentals.
Has done some research.
All
I
right,
think
well,
that's
we'll have to decide on our priorities one by one here. Were there others on the list that people want to see bubble to the top that we haven't talked about?
I have a thought on the planner number 10.
Yeah,
It looks like we have Aaron till next year, right?
yes,
Till next
14
summer.
months, right?
Yeah, so that wouldn't have to be on this year, but I do think that the town would really benefit from a part-time or full-time planner, and we might want to move toward that in the future. And, who knows, maybe we can hire Aaron, but, somebody. And I think that would be excellent, and that we're getting to a size where at least a part-time planner would make sense, and it would be issues we're dealing with.
It's sort of an odd priority. for the
Yeah.
Select board to have though. Typically, staffing doesn't fall under.
But planning, you could say planning as an activity and someone to help find financing for big projects. We've had Susie's group, the Resilience Committee is batting 1,000. They're on their 4th grant for resilience work, which is amazing, starting with Richard Bates and the Sebago Technics thing. But the work that group has done takes longer because it's all volunteers doing all of that and then contracting with MCOG or somebody to help do stuff. And if we had a planner on staff, then we could advance the select board's goals and the community's goals more quickly. So I think putting that as a budget priority somehow, it doesn't have to, we're not gonna work on it other than remember that we want it to be in the budget. In some way, shape or form.
Yeah, it ties my hands a bit with other staffing decisions.
Well, but you work for the select board. If we tell you this is what matters to us, then you need to listen to that.
Yeah, no,
You're gonna be in the corner.
Charge of the staff. Who's
I
in
mean-
charge of staff?
Well, except all the staff work for the select board. And so if you want to come back and say,
Well,
we can't
no,
afford to.
Actually, they
Well, they work
That's
for
not true,
Brandon,
yeah.
right?
You
but
work for us.
It's like,
exactly, I do.
that's right. So, I mean, if you have a pushback, like, if we pay X for a planner, it would have these consequences.
Mhm.
That's part of the budget conversations. But I think it's legitimate.
It's an odd priority, like, I wouldn't want to set a precedent with the select board, we need a second Parks and Rec director.
But, I mean, it was obviously the select board taking the ambulance on. That, there was a whole confluence of events that brought that to the
think that's-
voters.
I think that's much bigger than staffing. I think that's about a service being available in town or not.
Right.
And then either way, it wasn't decided by the select board. It went to a vote.
Well, right. But everything in our budget goes to a vote, so, you could say that too.
Mhm.
How are we gonna vote on these priorities? Are we gonna each pick 5 and then only vote those, and then the other ones we vote no? How are we gonna physically do it? How are we gonna manage it?
Well, I guess the first question is Brandon's point of that he thinks we shouldn't include things like the climate action plan or the TIP program that are already happening.
Okay,
And we
Okay.
choose things
okay,
like, say, the short-term rental thing, which
Okay.
we're not on our
We're
radar.
already eliminated half of them if we do that.
Yeah, right. I mean, because we are already working on so many of these. I do think that a fundraising effort, at least initially, would require some support from the select board. Do you think that, or do you think
no, that's one of my
so?
top 5.
I mean, it may be like the TIF and the climate action plan that, we push and then it gets rolling and then we don't have that much to do with it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which I think is exactly the type of thing that should be a priority, where you
Okay.
like to
Okay,
make happen, and then if there's a path forward, you hand it out to the group to take it over. like
Right.
Okay.
these other
right.
things.
So then,
I think that if we should reword that to not rec center. So we're not building a rec. Center.
yeah,
mean,
that's why I
know
was
We'd
thinking,
all love to.
I think it'd be nice if it had some little name,
If nobody wants to donate it, great.
we should come up with a name for it. You could have a contest. People could call it, Pine Top or
Yeah.
St. George
Memorial
Camp, or
Center.
whatever.
At this point, it's the Snow Point property.
Nose Point Rec Community Building or something, I mean, that's all it's gonna be really.
Needs to be something short though.
Yeah.
Not too long.
I think until there's a more official name, I think referring it to the Snows Point property
Or
Okay.
building, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
would,
Snows Point.
should eliminate it.
We can even just call it Snows Point.
And not lead folks to believe that, a building with swimming pools and basketball. courts
Right,
is not-
that's the problem with calling it rec center.
Information is big on that one. That should definitely be a priority.
Snows.
So then I'm wondering if sort of a community engagement and education priority could encompass a few of these, like the water thing, like the programs, panel discussions, the seaweed and the fisherman thing, and I mean, that's been a priority. That was a priority this year, and we got the website done, and that's huge. Does that make sense to have that be?
Yeah, but
community?
see, some of those I'm for, some of them I'm against. So,
All right, well,
yeah.
which,
I don't know how we can do that without parsing things out. I mean, I don't know, in terms of making these priorities.
You think that maybe they're a little too specific in places rather than just sort of a general, we're for doing this? I mean, some of them are general climate action plan. It doesn't say anything about what it's supposed to do, but then you have ones like the supporting working water plant with A, B, C, D in it.
Brandon, what do you think we should do?
For which one specifically?
Well,
What's the question?
if you had to pick 5 that were, say, unique or becoming unique for 2026 and not ongoing, what would you pick? Or that needed to be jump started in 2026?
I'd pick numbers 2 and 3.
Okay,
So the Snows Point property,
right,
short-term rentals, I think those are both primed to be jump-started.
okay,
And then you may find at the end of either of those at the end of the year, there is some path forward, but we explored it and we can, take it off the list moving forward. And we can tell the public
Mm,
one stance on why we're not monitoring short-term rentals, for example.
okay,
I think the school board piece,
Needs to have,
was important.
number 11, you mean?
yeah.
Number
Yes.
11. Okay,
Just because that caused, that was more difficult at times than, it needed to be.
And number 7, the housing collaboration and
but see, aren't we doing that
land
already?
use ordinances.
I mean, the
Yes, I mean,
1829, we have to address, but the collaboration,
Right, I mean,
that's not really us, though, is it?
No.
Yeah, I think that you all are going to collaborate with all nonprofits doing
All
work
these
in
things.
town anytime that there's an opportunity to collaborate. And so I don't know that it should be any more of a priority than, you know,
Everything else we do.
well, then, you know, it's really all work that all nonprofits are doing, you know.
Mhm. And what about the community engagement and education piece, which
I think that
could have,
should always, yeah, I think that should
I
remain a
mean,
priority. We still
right
have,
now,
like,
right now, it's under number 15. And it just, there's also some pieces under 9.
I would like to see, like a more like a specific plan for community engagement for the year, that we would spend some time in one of the early meetings of the year and be like, here are the few topics that we want to more targetedly engage the community on. So these are the panels that we're gonna schedule for the year, or whatever mechanism for engagement you choose. Last year, I believe it was the website was a big one, and that has done it right, so.
I agree.
So
I just think that there's still a ton of, I don't even know if misinformation or just lack of understanding of like how town government works
Right.
for folks that are
It's
not closely
amazing
involved.
what people don't know.
Right.
Yeah, people think Port Clyde has its own government. It
Right.
has nothing to do.
Yeah, and so I think,
And they don't know it's St. George.
And it's a separate town.
Yeah, it's a separate town.
so again, I think the more that we can do,
So if then our list of 5 were the fundraising, explore short-term rentals, community engagement and education, that's 3,
School board collaboration.
school board collaboration. And I think it's,
I still want to see 20 on there. Because we
Well-
don't know what opportunities might come up.
I agree with
Alright.
with number 20.
well, and that we know that the, Conservation Commission is willing to take on the open space plan, which I think could encompass that too.
I think this is.
Yeah, but this
But
is,
this-
this is a little broader than.
I know.
This is like, what if some opportunity comes up that the select board has to act on?
Right.
Yeah, but is that a select board priority to start out with if nothing has come up?
Probably not.
I mean, if
No,
nothing gets
but-
offered, it becomes a select.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think
Well-
if it was a priority, one of the things that you could do is figure out ways to pursue it. And maybe it's tasking the Conservation Commission with that, although they would still need you all to. I think,
I think it sort of
Tend
keeps
to
it in the
about-
forefront, Brian. If it's a priority, it's like, okay, we're on the lookout.
Well, and we have reason to believe that there are some opportunities that require us to think about them, which is what's prompting Steve and Brandon, I think.
Okay.
I'm not against it at all. It's just-
Well, I still sort of hate number 3, considered short-term rental, but when I hear, I'm being honest, but when I hear Brandon describe it as exploring it, I guess I can live with it.
It's just
But-
an idea.
It's just an idea floating out there, but in general, I hate everything about it.
Well,
I'll say that.
and the rest of the board may hate it by the time that you're done.
I'll make
exploring
sure they
it,
do.
too.
But see, the reason it got erased from the list.
Well,
Before partly is somebody has to be enthusiastic for there to be a group that's gonna pick up this ball and run with it. And
I have no
You're not
enthusiasm
gonna do
whatsoever.
that.
No,
so,
no.
Brian sounds enthusiastic.
He
about
does, he does, he says, yeah.
Enthusiasm.
Maybe.
and I know Greg Soudier from the the Cragner has paid close attention through like the Penn Bay Chamber of Commerce and stuff when that was still in existence. So he is a really good resource and might be interested in being on some little.
Has a budget impact as well, which he's also on.
Yes, I mean, obviously, as a revenue stream, that's a big plus, but, so yes, my concern about including it is who's gonna do it. Cause I'm tapped out with these other things I'm doing. But, so we've narrowed it down to the fundraising effort. Number 3, despite reservations. Number 7. Number
I
11,
don't think we included 7.
Yeah,
well,
I mean, that's another collaboration. I mean, I
because
don't-
you think it's the same as 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Already doing it,
Right.
the housing thing.
Yeah,
Where it's gonna happen whether it's on this list or
right,
not.
right.
Okay, and then community engagement and pay attention to land acquisition. So are people supportive of those? However many that is?
I'm not crazy about community engagement either. Just
Well,
not.
I
I
know.
mean, I've gone to 47 meetings about that. The same people attend every time. I haven't learned anything new in the last couple of years. It's fine. A lot of those meetings have to take place because of grants, that they have the money to do that and they need to do that. But does that really further anything?
But I thought you were just saying you were eager to make sure people in Port Clyde knew they were part of St.
That's
George.
the government side. I'm talking about like,
See, I'm encompassing all of that. For
Well,
us to, the
right.
website, communications with the public, all of that to me is community engagement, so.
that's fine. I can live with that. I just think we spend a lot of time, we bend over backward to do these things and we don't get anything for the effort.
I think that's the goal of this priority is that you may
Yeah,
start
you get
seeing
more.
more than the same one person.
Appreciate you.
Right.
They never come.
See,
They don't.
see, Tammy.
I did.
Yeah,
I got invited to a couple meetings. I came and now I'm sitting here.
right.
So, I
That's
mean, it
right.
happens. People do.
And I think this website and being able to get, a text message when there's a road closure or, the harbor committee meeting is coming up. I think there's a lot of potential for people.
But I think that's
know
what the
more.
meeting should be about, just those things that you just mentioned, like how to get on the list, how to get an email,
Right,
what the government encompasses, and no more than that, no more, because you lose people's interest. You see people's eyes clouding over if you try to do more than that. So,
Ask what their interests are. Then we do those meetings.
I know, but I
We
always
need to do
see,
another survey.
I always see people with way more expectations about what we can possibly do as a select board. Why
right.
doesn't the select board do that? I'm like, well, we're not gonna start an industry down here. I mean, there's a lot of people in their minds think that we can do anything. And
But-
maybe that's good, but it drives me insane.
But I think that we should all be serving as ambassadors to understanding government and it's what it can do and can't do. So that when somebody says to you, we need to limit the number of short-term rentals, we can say, that's not one of the things that we can
Who
do.
said that?
Yeah,
And then they
right.
get mad. They're
Yeah,
angry.
somebody got mad
Yeah,
yesterday. I
Yeah,
had that
yeah.
conversation at a birthday party. All right, well, I think we have our consensus about these.
Question about
Yeah.
these numbers. When Steve Sullivan was here, and we were discussing personal property tax, didn't he say that the state is going to start looking at rentals, short-term rentals and how they can,
We should do it first.
What
um,
he was talking about was that currently the only short-term rentals that are taxed for personal property are the ones like the Linda Bean properties that are only rentals, as opposed to like when Wendy owned a house that she came to X number of weeks a year and then rented
And
Y
they
number.
didn't say that they were also looking at, because there's so many of those now, these private rentals that the state is gonna try to start looking at that also.
He just said we haven't looked at that yet. That's my
Yeah.
recollection of what he said.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I agree with you that to me, they should be doing that. You know, they're collecting sales tax. When I rented our house here before we lived here
Mhm.
full time, I paid the 7% sales tax for every rental that used our house. So if they had required me to say, this is the toaster oven is worth $30 or whatever,
yeah.
you know, I would have been paying that personal property
well,
tax.
that's
but-
what I'm saying, you know, related to this and having it eventually start charging a fee to get a permit to have a short-term rental, that we're gonna have a personal property tax, eventually they're gonna come with a personal property tax with this. They can say yet, but, and then we're gonna say, well, you also need to come to the town office and get a permit and pay $300 or whatever.
See, I think they're different things.
Also,
I would be very surprised if they try to go down the very messy regulation of places that are rented part-time by people who themselves spend time
I
there.
know, but
I
eventually,
think that they, you know, just like it's been on the books that we're supposed to be paying for your grandmother's wedding ring that you have that's worth over $1,000, you're supposed to be paying personal property tax. They never collect that. They don't totally ignore it. So the legislature is planning to do away with that.
right,
I think they're not looking to get into really messy regulation. I think they're more likely to stick with the ones that are clearly a business than the ones where, you know, Wendy owns a house and she comes here as much as she can and then she rents it 6 weeks a year to somebody else.
which is a
that-
business, it's a business.
Well, very part-time though.
It's a rental, it's a
compared to-
business. But anyway, I was just thinking that the personal property tax thing is out there and people aren't happy, and now they start hearing that, you know, we're considering this coming forward, and then it could supposedly generate some income. It's like, oh, here we go.
Well, and I
People are
think
gonna be
that
furious.
I think you're right, there could be pushback, and so. To Brandon's point and Brian's point, if we explore this,
Just
the
explore.
priority is to explore this.
Right.
And figure out what it would mean, get a sense from the community of how they feel about it, if we had a proposal. And then either we do it or we don't do it. If they don't want to do it, that's not
And if
gonna
people
happen.
are curious, you can say, no, you know, we
Right.
did the exploratory process. We heard, you know, in a resounding way from the community, they don't want this.
Well, I was
And then you
just
drop it.
thinking, you know, related to the personal property thing.
I think that's
I mean,
different.
then we've gotta, you know.
I think those are pretty different issues, and I think,
Well, they
I
are
think that they,
just something else that we're considering putting on the people that are trying to make an extra buck, and now we want a piece of that too.
Well, and that, I think that has to be discussed. It does. So,
Well, yeah, we have to explore.
yeah. All right.
yeah, I just, no, thank you.
We'll move on to the other aspects of our agenda here. So Tammy and I attended, Knox County is doing a strategic planning process, similar to the comprehensive planning process. And we went last week. And it was very interesting, I thought. I was sorry there weren't people from more municipalities there, were you? Because there was nobody there from
A lot of
Camden
towns were
or Rockport.
represented, and I was kind of surprised.
I don't think there was anybody there from Thomaston. You know, there was a number of people there for sure, smaller towns like us. But so what they did was they asked us to list the strengths of the county, the weaknesses from our perceptions, the opportunities, and the threats. So of course, I said that I thought the dispatch process was a weakness that had been an issue. And they had a number of people who worked for the county there, including fire and emergency services people there. And their position was that that's really turned around in the last few months. So I sent an email to Mike Smith and Katie Jacob and asked them if that was their perception.
Mhm.
And Mike said, yes, he does
Good.
think
Good.
that it's much better. And Katie said, yet to be determined,
Okay.
not perfect for sure.
Okay.
So at least it's better. An interesting theme here that resonates with our discussion about our own priorities. I think there was agreement amongst everybody there that communication and what does the county do for us? What are you doing anyway? What do you do with our money?
Right.
That
You
was a
know,
big one.
Right.
And
People don't
people
know
don't
that.
People don't
Yeah,
know.
They don't know.
And so, and I sat there thinking about the website and our communications select board priority. And I do think that just like they were saying, it's important for the community to understand what we do, what we're spending money on. This is why we have the budget pie charts
Mhm.
and stuff, you know, to try and make sure people understand what we're doing. And that was kind of a message to the county from all the municipalities. So so we participated in that. That was
I think they were kind of impressed with St. George, especially when you mentioned the resiliency committee. And they
right.
were watching St. George to see what's going to happen with that.
Yeah. Well,
Other
the
communities are watching us.
I mean, I think we all know that our town is ahead of a lot of others on the resiliency issues, in particular. And because MCOG is the consultant for this strategic planning process for the county, and they're aware of what we're doing,
Mhm.
I think we are kind of a role model for some of the other towns, which was good. So I just thought I'd tell you, we went to that. And I went, and Aaron attended by Zoom, the Mid-Coast Council of Governments twice a year has a general assembly of all the municipal leaders that are members of their organization, which is between Belfast and Bath. And there were probably 40 something people at that, and they are from all these communities, and a lot of them are people that are the town administrator, town manager, and then people from select boards or city councils and stuff. And so that group adopted its new goals, comprehensive economic development strategy for our area. And so these are the MCOG goals, which of course, housing was a top priority for that group. And they are hiring somebody to work at MCOG who's gonna focus on land use planning. So they'll have somebody who's got more expertise on that to help all of us. And they do have a fair amount of assistance for housing stuff, but I'm sure Rob is plugged in with that and so anyway, if anybody wants to see that, it's on their website. And I brought these brochures that I want to get to the St. George Business Alliance because there are these business loans that are available to people starting a business in the area. So, and they have this guy who's from their loan committee gave a talk about that. So people that are having a hard time qualifying with a regular bank might have an easier time with this loan program. So that's worth making people aware of that. So I think that's it for those things. Town managers report.
I believe I told you all about the BOA request.
Yes,
That was withdrawn, so,
hooray.
yeah, so we do not need to do anything there. Chris Levitt, he's one of the assistant fire chiefs. He is retiring effective tomorrow.
Wow.
And so after, yeah, a long, service with the town, and so, incredibly grateful for his leadership over the years. Really sad to see him go. At this point, it is my intention to not fill that position of, assistant chief.
So you're gonna have 3 instead of 4.
Yeah, because we really only have 2 active stations right now, and so I don't think that we need. A 4th member on that team. I think that the chief, the deputy chief, and an assistant chief is enough with.
Okay.
With Port Clyde not being an active station. But if you see Chris Levitt, or have his contact email, I encourage you to, share your gratitude for many years of his service. We have a sinkhole here in Tennant's Harbor.
Cool.
We do?
Yeah, hasn't swallowed.
Another tourist
Has
attraction.
has not swallowed anything. Steve has checked it out and has cold patched it, and we're monitoring it. This is on Mechanic Street, so sort of behind Tennant's Harbor General Store. At this point, we're not sure what's causing it. I think to diagnose it, we would probably have to cut open some of the road and try to figure it out.
Yikes.
My concern is that it may be part of the state drain system.
Interesting.
So,
Like some sort of thing we didn't know about.
There's no water,
Does
period,
town
right?
water go down the street?
It does.
I would assume so.
It doesn't go very far. No,
Okay.
it doesn't.
Sounds
It
like
doesn't
leaking
go to like Diane Hall's office. It does.
Okay, well, that's where the
Yeah.
sinkhole is, so.
Is it
Near her.
Yeah.
on her property or in the road?
It's on the edge of the road.
Well, I'll tell the engineers just, and they'll maybe check it out too. So.
Great.
Yeah.
It's in front of Diane's house.
So, I will bring more of an update to, the next meeting.
Okay.
Found out about this on vacation and didn't have time to go check it out, today, so. We have a beaver dam forming in, the
Cool.
marsh.
Nice.
Yeah,
Cool.
They're building it right up.
they are.
Speaking of engineers,
One resident has requested that we have the beavers removed.
Why?
Well, he doesn't want the water to come up, and sort of
Well,
encroach
it
on his
used to be
property.
up quite a bit more than it is now, so.
Yeah, it would encroach on his property. He's worried it'll generate more mosquitoes, all of that. My hope is that it will prevent some of the salt water from coming into the marsh.
Ah.
More kayaking water.
Exactly, yeah. Great news for our community boat ride.
our new program, right?
What is the status of that?
It is open. And
Oh, the
so,
kayaks are over there and.
yeah, the kayaks and the canoes and the life jackets and the paddles and signage and,
Where did they end up?
they are behind the library.
Oh, the
So,
library.
So like
Mhm.
right
Is,
behind it.
is there anything on the website yet
Uh,
promoting this?
there were some posts made on Facebook. I'm trying to remember if they were posted on the Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec put them on.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was on the town website or not. I will check on
Yeah,
that.
it makes sense to have, put out a bulletin that this has happened, don't you
Mhm.
think?
Yeah, or just have a
A
a
link.
more permanent link there to let folks know about
Yeah.
recreation opportunities in town. But yeah, if you were to, there's like a path, down in the library's backyard.
Past the gardens.
Yeah, and so you follow the path and then you'll see one that, immediately turns left after the gardens and the boat rack's up there. It's a very pretty spot. It came together really nicely, and so,
Very cool that it was a student project.
yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely a ground up, you know, the ground up recommendation and everything.
Yeah, I'm happy that he, got to see at a pretty young age, your
Government
involvement in
initiative.
local government. So,
Did I interrupt you on the beaver dam? Are we supposed?
oh, at this point, I don't see the need to do anything. I am not inclined to have the beavers removed. I would want to hear from far more property owners before pursuing that.
And I think before we do that, we'd have to talk to like Fish and Wildlife, we'd have to
Right.
talk to somebody proper about doing that.
We,
like,
we
does
can
this make
do it
sense?
when our roads are,
Jeopardize?
yeah.
Okay,
So we often have beaver removed over on Ridge Road.
oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Oh, yes.
Do you
Uh,
know him personally?
I've seen the mess that they can create over there.
He's
It's pretty fun.
persistent over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some damage.
Exactly.
And at this point, we would never really be able to reopen where Watts Ave and Fogarty Corner connect because that has been flooded by the same beavers on the marsh.
Mm.
Not that I think we have any desire to reopen it, but
What? How
Right, that is a real,
evolved that was closed? Mother Nature and the beavers are how that happened.
no, it was, I mean, because you could drive it far before the road was closed. And so I just think the town didn't warrant it as, worth putting resources into.
They kind of abandoned that.
we still have it, it's a town way, I think.
We have a right of way across it. The road itself has been, close to maintenance. And so
Right.
we, those, same with like English Town Road, for example.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so, yeah, anyway, that's it for the beaver dam. Dripped in parking, I think that the dripped in activity is even higher this year. Today, for example, there were a lot of cars parked. They did a pretty good job of parking, I will admit. They were mostly off the road or as far off as they could be and stuck to one side, which was helpful. And the parking lot was full. And so
Mm.
this was sort of some of the data that I wanted to see before justifying any sort of expansion of the parking lot. We have more room there and typically last year when I would check it out, though, the road would be full and the lot would be empty. And so, right, it's nice to see that folks are utilizing it at least and sticking to one side of the road.
yeah, that's important.
Mhm.
Number wise, the other day I was counting and there were like 33 cars in the road, but there were like 28 in the parking lot. So
Mm.
people have been using the parking lot.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I don't, it was not built into next year's budget. And so, unless we have a low need for contracted services, we'll see. Maybe come spring next year, or we can build it into early July.
Where the road is down to one lane is a very small portion now, so that protects the area of the culvert that has had structural issues underneath. Cause it's
Yes.
down to that tiny little area.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, I
Yeah,
just wondered about that.
That's why that's closed.
Uh,
So,
Right, but before it was bigger, that there was one lane, I don't know, for yards, and now it's small.
it hasn't changed.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought had changed, no?
No.
Okay, well, I'm insane, all right.
After the storm.
I must not go that often.
Yeah, we have not changed it. I believe that is it for my report. And I'm still catching up again after being away for a week, and so there may be things that you'll give an update on next week.
That's what how you pay for your vacation, you have to catch up.
Yeah,
100 emails, Phil.
Yeah.
100 would be great.
I know. So we haven't gone through the select board policies yet this year. And I know I sent this email like the day we're going on vacation. If you or Tara could get me Word copies of all of versions of all of the select board policies, then we can circulate those to this group And we can come up with a plan for reviewing a few, 5 or 10 one night, 5 or 10 another night and get through them. But that's what I need for that to happen. And that'll be on our next, the next 2 agendas. I think we'll be looking at those.
Great.
So I can go out of the
Of the
committee.
specific policies that you send or of the whole manual?
Well, not the manual, because that's one PDF document. I
Right, but
need,
you want a Word version of the whole manual?
I don't care whether it's. No, I want, if there are 29 policies, I want 29 Word documents. So that we can edit them. And they were passed at different times, so that's how I know that's how she has them. I mean, I have the 11 we passed last November and this month. And then there are a bunch more that we'll figure that out,
Great.
but we just need to be able to update those. Planning Board,
Has not met,
Board of Appeals,
has not met.
Harbor Committee,
I don't know.
same for budget. Cemeteries met though.
Oh, boy.
Well, they're meeting on Thursday at the cemetery.
We're meeting this Thursday.
And I read the minutes from the last meeting and they asked you to ask the town attorney about the town's responsibility for headstones. So-
No, I've talked to Brandon
Okay.
about that. I've had no intentions of talking to the town attorney about anything. I mean, it's not my job to do that.
Right.
So I sent them all an email and said that I was going to ask Brandon the question and to, change the minutes to reflect that. And I did talk to Brandon about it and sent his response back to them. So they
Okay.
can discuss it at their meeting on Thursday.
And I sent them today that the Maine Cemetery Association or whatever has a document that lists all the laws that relate to cemeteries in Maine.
Right.
And so I sent that to everybody again today.
Yeah, they already had that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that, because I'm pretty sure the answer to their question is in there. Emergency Services has not met, but now that we have a chair, I think we will. The TIF committee, hasn't met, but Aaron and I and Max Johnstone met by Zoom with the woman from the state who runs the TIF office.
Hmm.
And it's not gonna work to have our TIF be what I was hoping it was gonna be. My thought was that we don't have a bunch of specific projects that we're looking to pay for, like a solar farm.
Mhm.
That instead we're looking to make our community economically resilient. Because if Port Clyde's underwater, we're not gonna have any businesses down there. So, can we generate TIF money to pay for that? And you can use some TIF money for that, but almost. You really have to have new economic development that you're tying your spending to.
Interesting. Wow.
So I think it's,
That's
other than
different.
the Port Clyde General Store and Cold Storage Road in front of it, because it is being raised, and if we decided we wanted to raise Cold Storage Road, and she gave examples of, say, you have restaurants that are buying a Port Clyde Fresh Catch, for example. The road going to someplace where there's a new business. You can pay for, but it's not like these are new businesses, these are.
That's different than the way I understood it.
It is,
Yeah.
right, unfortunately, we hadn't gotten a lot of clarity from our consultant, to realize those limitations, and so I think we're really gonna have to spend time figuring out whether this is gonna work for us or be justified. I mean, I think we've learned enough that it's great to know about this, and even if we have a very limited TIF now, or, have this in our back pocket for, like, somebody came in and did want to do some big project at the old Eastern Mussel Farm, and we wanted to fix up the road on the way there or something.
I see.
Now we know, but I'm not too sure at the moment where we're headed, with the TIF, having
Interesting.
talked to her. The comprehensive plan group is just waiting, which of course, wouldn't you know, the legislature passed this statute changing that comprehensive planning process, but anyway, I don't think it's gonna affect us, but we do have to find that out. Conservation.
Has not met, but they do put out a nice, among the many things they do, they put out a nice electronic newsletter and actually meant to send it to the board, so when they get home, we'll do that. But just to show you what it's like. But yeah, they're very impressive.
Now, they're having a big talk on emerald ash borer, or did that happen?
Yeah,
already?
that's in the newsletter. It's
Okay.
coming up, I think.
The Shellfish Committee?
They met last Tuesday. And I had to go an hour early because they had two presentations, one from Manomet and one from the NECASC, which is the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center, professor of Earth and Geographic and Climate Sciences. And they're all, and this particular company is from the University of Massachusetts. And they're here from Amherst studying the clam flats and looking at sedimentation and mud density and taking core samples. They're trying to find out why areas die out. And hope through these studies, they're hoping to bring back clamming to areas where they used to, get hundreds and hundreds of pounds of clams, and now they're not. It's all died out. And they're also talking with the old timers like David Taylor and Steve Taylor and people that have been clamming for 40 or 50 years to find out where they used to go, and it was like a bonanza all the time, and now there's no clams there, so. And they're looking at fluctuations in the tides, and I learned a lot of information about the moon and tides and how tides can raise and lower according to how the earth is moving and the moon's moving, and it was kind of interesting. And they, like I said, they're hoping to find answers related to why these areas are dying out.
Well, that's great.
And they've got a lot of young students like Aaron, that's, college students are all working with mentors to come here to Maine, and they said that St. George really has a lot of mud. I said, well,
We
we're
knew that.
we're a peninsula, and so we're surrounded by mud. So they really seem to be quite interested in an area called Potato Patch and then St. George. They did mention Glenmere. So that was interesting. And then this regular shellfish meeting, we just basically talked about contamination again, and they're still doing a lot of testing. A lot of testing going on in Thomaston because they're really concerned about the bay in Thomaston, and if that dies out completely, then they're gonna lose a big area, so they're trying to stop contamination from going in there and killing the shellfish.
I meant to mention one thing about the Conservation Commission. Of course, they did a lot of work creating that Fort Point Trail. And there was I think it was a statewide meeting on the trails bond that the state has created. And the one trail they cited as a perfect example was St. George's Fort Point Trail.
That's great.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Did they show the picture you took? Oh, no.
No idea. I'll try to get.
I
more
know that
detail.
picture you took of me and Betsy walking on the trail, and she's got her cane, was in the state parks and whatever newsletter
That's great.
last year.
Okay.
That was great that you took
Oh,
that.
and the
it showed-
shellfish ordinance did pass, finally, the last town to vote was Warren, and it also passed in Warren, so we signed a new ordinance, and
Good.
It will
It's
begin
in place.
in 2026.
So parks and, oh wait, solid waste.
Oh, solid waste recycling. They met on June 18th at 3 p.m. here at the town office in hopes of bringing in some new people, attendees or board members, and they were the only ones there. They talked about, possible new demo dumping fees for contractors, but they decided to put that on hold until they see how it's gonna work out with the no fees for non-commercial residents
Hmm.
and see if that's gonna create an impact to the income or, but you know, how that's gonna work. So they're gonna watch that to see what happens. They, did their survey and they had 102 responses related to possible changes to hours at the transfer station. And Ben said they pretty much got the idea that people are pretty happy with the current hours of operation. And they talked about maybe having one afternoon that they're open maybe a little bit later, but basically people seem to be happy with what's going on, so they're gonna continue to monitor that. And were you the one that sent the grant opportunity to me, Jane, to pass on to them from the state related to
Probably, I got a bunch of
recycling?
those.
I think, well, anyway, I had passed it on to them and they looked at it and they weren't able to get in before the deadline, but they'd like to look at it for next year. And you possibly, if it can be, if it can be used for composting, they would like to consider expanding that program because Ben says it's very popular and they sell out of the compost every year. So if they could get some sort of a grant to expand that, that would be great. And I don't know if anybody knows about Scrap Dog, but that was mentioned as an example of how composting could expand, where you go out to the public and leave a 5-gallon bucket and pick up a bucket and take
You
the
pay for
compost-
that. You pay for that.
And you take the
Yeah.
compost back to the transfer station.
Yeah.
And let's see, they talked about single stream recycling versus what we do now, and they think it will be at least 10 years before things might possibly change. They said, well, we're losing all our markets for plastics and things, so
Mhm.
really hard to get rid of it, so. They're looking at that. And while we were sitting there, Tara was thinking, you could tell she was thinking about something, and she was, another idea she thought for the grant money could be keep our wood chips in town and sell them along with compost. She says anytime there's a pile of wood chips over there waiting to be picked up to take out of town, a lot of people stop and ask, can we buy some of those?
Mhm.
So they're thinking that, to save the cost.
That makes sense.
We would just do our own investment in the wood chipping and then sell the chips to recoup our money and make a little extra money possibly, so.
Well,
We currently pay someone to do it, to come in and chip it and haul it away.
Right.
And so we would need, to purchase, likely an attachment for the Kubota.
Mhm.
The hydraulic, wood chipper attachment.
Might be a nice service for the town to offer that.
Mhm.
But she did say there was a lot of interest. And when
So-
they see it being chipped, they wanna buy them, so.
these are the kinds of things where if you had a planner, and right now, while we do have Erin here, I can ask her to look and see if there are any other grants out there for like expanding composting or, wood chip type programs. She can look and see.
Well,
You
she
know.
has time, I know she's
Yeah.
really busy with a
I
lot of
know
other
she
stuff.
is, but,
But-
and I sent Meg Rasmussen an email asking her if she could look and see if there were any grants available to help with the Snows Point property renovations. And she said she was gonna look, because there often are, grants out there, and it's these professionals that know where to look and find them. And
That's a good idea,
so,
so that's,
Yeah, that might get the ball rolling on
Right.
fundraising.
Okay, Parks and Rec,
Tomorrow night.
okay. Resilience,
Resilience met on June 25th. They voted on the Sebago contract. And they also talked about a few little tweaks that they needed from the contract. They want a paragraph to say that the amount of funds attributed to the contract will not be exceeded at all. I think their standard language is 1% without coming back to the client, or actually, I think it was 10%, and they changed it to 1, and now they're changing it to 0. They don't want to exceed, which makes sense, because they have only a certain amount from the grant. So, it
That
was.
contract was amended and signed today.
Oh, great. And then, there was, let's see, they elected Susie as the chair and Ingrid as the secretary, and that was it.
right. And then that's the end of the committees.
And I did attend, Zoom into the school board meeting.
Oh, yeah.
They're busy getting ready for they're excited about the grand opening at the new technical institute. And they, had a presentation, a gentleman came from Radical Reuse Deconstruction, I think it was called. And he takes down homes and buildings and reconstructs them uses all the materials to make something new. So, the school is working with them to put in a outdoor, learning classroom. They've got a pad up there. For some reason, they had a pad poured and it didn't get used, cement pad.
The one by the soccer field?
Yes,
Mhm.
so they're looking to work with this gentleman to bring in materials came from another building. They're in the process of seeking a grant, for the project. The project will probably be around $100,000, and they've so far applied for a grant to the DEP for $50,000, and they assume they will probably get donations and things to go along with it, so they will have an outdoor classroom.
Sounds pretty neat.
And they also mentioned that some of the homes that we are trying to have torn down here in town, he did mention the house at the top of the hill as a possible deconstruction, that they could come in and take it all apart and use it to reconstruct something else, or possibly use pieces.
What did you say? It's full of asbestos? Is that what
This
you?
heading is especially.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is asbestos.
Yeah.
Well, one of these two bills that just passed that relates to housing, which isn't likely to impact us that much in St. George, but it's all about renovating old buildings
Mhm.
and turning them into apartments and, housing for, the missing middle.
I read that. Anytime I read those laws, though, it always seems like they're skipping all these steps and skipping regulations that are designed to protect us, designed to protect open space.
Right.
And it just sort of rankles me. I mean, I realize we have to comply, but
Well, 1829, I think I'm expecting there to be some kind of home rule authority challenge.
oh, okay,
Because,
okay.
municipalities have a certain amount of control
Mhm.
over land use stuff.
Sure.
And just the point you were making, that they seem to have kind of trumped that from
Yeah.
the legislature.
Right.
And I'm not sure that all the provisions in there would fly.
Okay. Right.
And so we'll see. Some of them, fine, but, and I'm not sure that many of those are gonna affect us because we don't have water and sewer
Mhm.
most places, but, there will be some changes and there will be a fair amount of regulations happening. But I did think in communities, bigger communities, like Rockland or somewhere, if you have a big old house, there's ways of turning it into apartments,
Mm. Mm.
that's a good thing.
Mm.
If there's fast track for that.
Just a note, I attended the final day of this workshop with a company called Dooryard that the CDC is having for the affordable housing project they're working on Route 73, which is the mixed housing, some at market and some apartments and some rental and some ownership. And I was impressed with the staff of this Dooryard company. They seemed very knowledgeable, just sort of real people, real down to earth, and so it looked like they're, we saw Rob for a moment here on Zoom, but it looked like they're moving ahead with, sort of a phased approach where they would maybe go for a small number of units to start with and then see if they could develop, which I think makes a lot of sense. What do I know? But anyway, it was an impressive last day with the summaries and a lot of people from our town there and
Good,
these professional planners, whatever.
all focused on housing.
Yeah,
It was like a 2-day thing, right?
yeah, it was a big workshop and I didn't go to the big workshop part. I just went to the final summary day. Yeah. It was interesting. So I'm trying to keep tabs on that for the
Good,
board.
well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Did we interrupt you about the school, Tammy? I think they've got their HVAC contractor up there, right? Are they working on that? now?
I'm not sure, he didn't mention it that had started it or not, I know it's coming pretty quickly. And they're paving the road today up to the new school.
That'll be nice. That had a fair number of potholes in it.
It was bad.
And the grand opening for the CTE Makerspace is August 14th, right? Is it at 6 o'clock? Do we know what time it is?
I'm not,
I know there'll be,
I'm
well,
thinking it is 6 o'clock.
That sounds right. We have time to update.
yeah, we'll do our part to, let people know about that. All right, well, we will meet again July 14th. And we'll start chipping away on these select board policies, which is challenge. So I
It's
will
not 8 o'clock yet.
entertain a motion to adjourn.
Don't move.
Second, all in favor? All five, thank you.
Your leadership.